Hey everybody, welcome to Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. My name is Reed with Best Made Videos. We are a wedding videography company based out of West Seattle, Washington, and I'm excited to be joined today. We've had this one on the books for quite a while. I'm excited to finally kind of catch up and sit down with Crystal Jeans, a photographer down in Portland. Why don't you introduce yourself, tell us who you are and what you do.
Hi, I'm Crystal. I am based in Portland, Oregon. I'm a wedding and portrait photographer, and I started my business in North Carolina about 16 years ago. Moved to Portland in 2012, and just been going strong since then.
Yeah, and one thing I thought what was interesting about you is just how long you have been doing photography. I mean, a lot of, and it kind of goes across the board, any vendor, but a lot of people nowadays getting into it. The last couple of years. Did you kind of grow up interested in photography, or what was kind of the motivation? Kind of give us a little backstory. Did you grow up with a camera in your hands, or was it something you kind of found in school, or how did that go?
Yeah, I have always been interested in photography. I got my first camera with my allowance in third grade and just carried it around with me everywhere. I was always, I have tons and tons of books from middle school and high school. I always had my camera. I wanted to do more art photography, so that was sort of my focus when I went to college. My dad was always trying to get me to shoot weddings, and I was like, no, not wanting to do weddings. And then my friend volunteered me to shoot her friend's wedding right after college, and I decided to do it and fell in love with it and never looked back.
So did you go to school to study photography then?
I did. I studied photography and journalism.
Because I think a lot of wedding vendors aren't fortunate enough to kind of actually go to school to study kind of what they end up doing. So did you learn a lot from that? Were there a lot of lessons and stuff from that? Or did you feel like kind of just being kind of self-taught too from such a young age? Did you feel comfortable with that?
Well, I definitely feel like I learned more from going to school for it. When I was growing up with a camera, I just had a point and shoot. I never really had that much training in it until I got to school. And I think that, learning the film side of it definitely helped, because when I was in school, it was all film and in the darkroom, and I got to learn all about exposure and composition and all of those, things that, you spend all your time in the darkroom and you can see it come out on the paper.
Yeah, it's because when I went to school, I did just a brief photography, and I kind of definitely was at that tail end of. We still did do film exposure, but it was definitely kind of on its way out. But it really did teach you the importance of kind of getting it right in the camera, right? Where I think nowadays I work with a lot of photographers, and they're like, "Oh, I'll just fix it in Photoshop." We'll just,
right.
And when you're doing that, I mean, it just causes you to be a lot more intentional, I guess, with your photography.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you kind of agree with that?
I did start my very first wedding. I shot with film. And then I moved into solely digital, but I do think it definitely made me more intentional and, just.
What was it like kind of going into that first wedding? Were you nervous? And you had said, your dad or whatever talked to you about, maybe doing weddings, and what was the hesitation about that? Was it just not something you were interested in the beginning?
I think it was I had never been to any fun weddings growing up. I never knew that weddings could be fun. I grew up in a very small town. They were all church weddings. I never knew that there were receptions. We would always just go for a very long ceremony, and then I was just young and let's go. Once I, saw that, started doing research and looking at all wedding blogs, seeing how much fun they could be and how unique and personal they could be, that's when I really started to fall in love with the idea of it. So just went from there.
Are you someone that kind of enjoys the romance of the day too? Do you get caught up in that? I mean, we talk with a lot of photographers or vendors of any kind. Some people just like gatherings or, the social aspect or the event. I mean, do you get caught up in kind of that love story too?
Yeah, I think for sure. I think it's really awesome being a part of someone's, very happy day. You're surrounded by so many happy people, and it's impossible to not get caught up in just the personalities of the day and the story, and when they're doing their toasts, all the meaningful things they have to say. It's hard not to just fall in with that.
How did that first wedding go that your friend asked you to do?
It went pretty well, actually. I mean, it was a beautiful venue and a great couple. Like, all of the family and guests that were there were really awesome, and it was pretty well laid out. I do a lot of hands-on with, helping to plan the timeline. Of course, when I was doing my first wedding, I wasn't as knowledgeable about that, but I was very lucky in that it was a very smooth flowing day, and it wasn't, I didn't really have anything,
No disasters.
like any bumps in the roads. Yeah.
So when you, after you kind of left school, was it going to be photography full steam ahead, or did you have to kind of balance, working other jobs and things, or how did that kind of go?
Yeah. So when I first graduated, I didn't have a plan to go into photography. I think I was focusing more on trying to get journalism work at that point, photojournalism work. And I did work for a little while at a newspaper as a journalist and photographer. And then after I did the first wedding, I invested a lot in building my equipment base and building a website and just photographing anyone I could. Anybody that would jump on board, like, I'd be up at sunrise photographing them just to build my portfolio and get experience. And then it just sort of fell from there. I worked at a couple different places, and was lucky enough to have a bunch of coworkers getting married who just put their trust in me, and it just built from there.
Where did kind of that drive come from to kind of hustle that and build that? Did you kind of grow up, what did like your family think, or were people, when you say, hey, I'm going to kind of try to do this photography thing, was there a lot of support, or how did that go?
Yeah, there was a lot of support. And I think a lot of it came from growing up. My dad is, very entrepreneurial and has had many businesses that he's started over the years. And just seeing that always made me think that I could have my own business as well. So it just sort of, I guess, was ingrained in me already. And I have just a passion for, putting the work in and just building something and just seeing where it goes.
Why don't you kind of talk about your style a little bit as a photographer? What do you like to focus on, or how would you kind of describe, how do you describe to clients or other people kind of what you look for?
Yeah, so I really am drawn to lots of vibrant colors, very colorful, and also I love the outdoors. So anytime, I love incorporating nature into all of my work pretty much. So I love couples that are really fun and pretty laid back, easygoing, but also like to make it very personal to themselves. And just, I like to capture those personalities and making it unique to them.
What was the process like for you kind of starting your photography business? Were there things that you maybe thought would be easier that were harder, or things that you thought would be harder that you were able to excel at? I know that we as creatives all kind of have different strengths and weaknesses, and we talk a lot on the podcast about kind of balancing the business side with the creative side. What was it like for you, and did you enjoy kind of that process?
I definitely enjoy the process. I love all of the business aspects. I think the hardest thing for me is the balancing of personal life with work life and not becoming a workaholic and not getting buried in work or feeling overwhelmed. So just learning that balance, I think, was the hardest thing for me when I was starting out. Getting all of my systems streamlined. It really, probably took a good 5 to 7 years before I was at a place where I felt like I had my systems in place. And so, yeah, just in the beginning, it was really hard balancing and juggling that.
And how do you balance that now? How do you do you feel like you found balance in that, and how has that gone? Because I know that that's something that kind of everybody, myself included, struggles with.
I feel like it's constantly evolving, and I do have a pretty good handle on it now. But as things change and there's more things that you have to incorporate, like social media is, such a big aspect now. So it's like constantly learning like new ways to get your systems flowing and things, scheduled and timelines. But I think I do have a pretty good handle on it now. I have my editing workflow is pretty fast, where my first few years starting it, my turnaround time was probably 1 to 2 months, and now it's like 1 to 2 weeks, unless I'm out of town. So just finding little ways here and there, apps and programs to help run the back end of things.
Yeah, it's interesting where you said that it took you you felt like 5 to 7 years to really kind of get your systems where, that's longer than even a lot of people have been doing, weddings nowadays, which is everyone getting into it. So, there just must be a lot of kind of knowledge base there, right? As someone that's been doing it as long as you have. Yeah,
for sure. It's just constantly changing and evolving. And I think that's the thing that makes it the most challenging, is just staying on top of, technology and how that is constantly changing.
Yeah, it's funny. Just even like you were saying with kind of social media and everything coming on. Like I go to a lot of like SEO classes and stuff, and they talk about 5-10 years ago you could just type like weddings 1 million times on your website and like you would rank and people would find you. And now you have to do different things, and like as a wedding photographer, I'm sure 10 years ago you just like built a website, but like you said, now it's social media and Pinterest, and if you're doing Facebook ads or Google ads or posting stuff on Snapchat, whatever. There's just so much more stuff that you have to. Is it overwhelming, or do you just feel like having your knowledge base, you've just kind of been able to grow and adapt as things have come along?
I feel like having my knowledge base definitely helps me to grow and adapt. I think it's just keeping me on my toes. So. It's not overwhelming. It just is constantly just finding that balance and knowing when to, spend more time here or there, or, yeah.
Talk about kind of clients that you like to work with. What is your, kind of ideal or not typical, but, the people that like it or people that are kind of drawn to your work, who do you tend to work with the most?
I think I tend to attract the kind of clients that I would be friends with. I think I attract a lot of couples who do love the outdoors and who are very laid back and just easygoing, but who value photography. I do have a lot of clients who just love color and vibrant images and just want to have fun, and who also really love spending the day with their friends and family. They definitely have a big focus on that, more than like the details in a lot of cases, which is nice, because I love capturing like the guests at weddings. That's one of my favorite things to photograph and focus on, is just like capturing expressions, people laughing and having fun, and just the party of the day.
Yeah, no, I think that that's something that definitely kind of gets forgotten nowadays, with so much money being spent on like so many other things, and it really is like just a gathering of the closest people in friends or family, whatever, but the closest people in your life. And it is, I think so. We try to focus on that too. capturing like, the event as a whole. Is that something you've always really kind of tried to focus on?
For sure. I feel like I try to focus on capturing every single part of the day. Um, I love focusing on the guests, but the details are important as well. So I feel like when I show up at a wedding, I turn on and my brain is just on max for the next 5, 6, 8 hours, however long it is, and I'm just constantly shooting. Like if nothing's really happening with the people or the events, then I will turn and focus on the details, or make have people just pose for the camera. So I'm like never just sitting back and hanging out. I'm constantly just trying to capture anything from the day to tell the story.
Doing this as long as you have, how do you stay motivated and keep finding new, fresh things? Is that just something that comes naturally? You show up and you're just excited to be there, or how do you constantly kind of bring fresh new energy to it?
Yeah, I think it is something that just sort of comes naturally, which is, I guess, why I've been doing this for as long as I have. I just really enjoy the energy of the day. And, when you've got weddings every weekend all summer, it's easy to start feeling burnt out, but every wedding is so different and the people are so unique that it makes it a lot easier, to get refreshed at each new wedding. And especially, each new year, you have a little bit of downtime in the winter to sort of revitalize and get excited for the next year. And so, yeah, it's like a cycle that just keeps going.
Have you seen, just in the time that you've been doing this, big trends, obviously changes over the years, things maybe for the better or for the worse? I mean, what are some things that you've seen kind of change in your time doing this?
I think, of course, there's tons of editing trends that have come and gone over the years, lots and lots of them. So definitely, that's the biggest thing I think that stands out.
Talk about, and I was kind of reading on your site, just quite a journey to find yourself in Portland. Now, do you want to talk about kind of, like you said, you grew up on the East Coast, did some traveling and things. How did you find yourself in Portland?
Yeah, so I started my business in Charlotte, North Carolina, in 2005, and I had a lot of really amazing weddings. I found that most of them weren't actually in Charlotte. I was traveling a lot for weddings and doing a lot of destination work. And I just felt like I wasn't as inspired with the landscape. And I felt like the people that were in the area, I wasn't really connecting with the clients I was wanting to. So I just wanted to get out into the United States and see what other kind of place I might like to live. So I planned a road trip, and for 4 months I just drove around the country and was searching for a new city that I might like, and found it in Portland and moved here a few months later. And it's definitely, I had pretty much no downtime. As soon as I moved here, I started booking weddings, and it definitely was the right move for sure.
What was it about Portland that drew you so much to kind of the Pacific Northwest?
Definitely the landscape was one of them, just the color of the sky, the trees, and then just the people, the artistic energy that I felt when I first came here really resonated with me, and just the resourcefulness of everyone, and just the energy itself was just refreshing. Coming from the East Coast, and even like you said, a lot of destination weddings, was there a big difference with the weddings in Portland and the clientele or anything like that versus elsewhere? Was that a big change, or was that kind of the way you focus on it, it wasn't as big of a deal? It is a pretty big change. Actually, there's a lot more like do-it-yourself kind of weddings here, I feel, and Um, they're a little more, I feel like a little more personalized, a little more laid back, a little more just easygoing. I think that's the biggest thing that has stood out to me.
Was it difficult, starting your business and then, moving across the country and having to kind of not necessarily rebrand, but kind of get into the market here? Was that more challenging or not for you?
It was not challenging at all, actually. Surprisingly, I expected to, potentially have to get another job while I was building my business here, but it just sort of picked up. When I was planning the road trip, I managed to book several weddings around the country while I was traveling. And then I ran a wedding contest for Portland, and the couple that won ended up having a lot of friends, and several of them ended up booking me, and then it just sort of snowballed from there. So I really didn't have to, worry too much about building it once I moved here. It just sort of all fell into place, which was nice.
Yeah, because I think, myself included, I think a lot of people would worry about, changing states or cities or much less, across the country. That's excellent, dear. How do you now, and then, obviously moving and then continuing now, how do you just let your work stand out? How do you market, for new couples? Is it just kind of word of mouth now, or what do you focus on in terms of finding new clients?
I think primarily it is word of mouth. And then just otherwise, it's a lot of marketing through, blogging and my website and Instagram. If it's not word of mouth, it's usually from Instagram or just someone finding my website. And I think I've just been lucky in that my website attracts the kind of couples that I'm looking for, and they just sort of gravitate towards the work that I have that's out there, and it goes from there.
What does the process kind of look like working with you? If I'm a couple and and I find you and I'm inspired by your work, what does that look like? And then how do you work with them and kind of approach the wedding day and kind of walk us through that process?
Yeah, so I like to be very hands-on when leading up to the wedding. So I like to get to know my couples. I send out a questionnaire when they book, just with a bunch of questions about them and their personalities and what they're looking for. And I encourage an engagement session for all of them. It's included complimentary in all of my packages, so I can get a chance to work with them and get to know them. And I just like to do a lot of pre-planning for leading up to the wedding with their timeline, so that everything's really smooth and easygoing on the wedding day. And that way I can just sort of hang back and shoot from the sidelines and not be as visible, just to, capture it as it all unfolds.
So you do enjoy kind of that more documentary kind of approach to the wedding day?
Yeah, for sure. I love the post couples portraits, and of course throughout the day I will, pull them aside if I see something that would make an amazing portrait. But otherwise I just like to document it as it unfolds, and just very photojournalistic style.
Do you kind of give advice to them, before the wedding day, or how do you kind of, like you said, you like to be really hands-on? What kind of advice do you give them, or do you kind of talk with them through the engagement session and kind of get, kind of your rhythm down, or how do you kind of work on that to make sure they're comfortable and it all goes smooth?
Yeah, so the engagement session definitely helps, just to let them sort of get a taste of what my shooting style is and what to expect on the wedding day, and just how I work with them and direct them. And then, the questionnaire really helps. I also send out questionnaires about their vendors and their plans and any little details that I might not know about. And then there's also the timeline planning, of course. And then I send out quite a few tip sheets, just with suggestions on how to make it really smooth, and how little things that they could do just to improve the photography for the day, like where to place the cake, or tips that they can tell their wedding party, while they're walking down the aisle, how to hold their bouquets, any little thing that could make a difference, and just to throw it out there in the beginning, and then at the wedding day, just stand back and see how it all happens.
In terms of kind of, delivering your photos to couples and having them check things out, what's the biggest, compliment that you could get from a couple about, when they see their work from you? What do you want, kind of the emotions you want, or what kinds of, reaction do you want from couples when you share their photos with them?
I think probably a good mix of, just warm fuzzies and also laughter. I love capturing, the emotional moments of the day, but also, I really like anything quirky, funny expressions, silly things that happen during the day. I will capture all of that, and hopefully, my couples will look back at it and get a good laugh, or, just feel really, really warm and fuzzy inside.
That's great. Well, on your website, you have a pretty extensive kind of about me and talking about different stuff you like to do when you're not photographing. Do you want to kind of, what do you do when you're not taking photos? And you talk about that work-life balance, and what do you kind of do for fun?
Yeah, and so some of the things I really enjoy, especially being in the Pacific Northwest, I love camping, I love swimming, and I played kickball, and I played softball this past year. I am really into music, and just checking out all kinds of music. Oh my gosh, don't ask me that question. I'm the worst at answering that.
Well, Portland's got a pretty good, scene in terms of like stuff coming through, right?
Oh yeah. Lots of shows, and I collect vinyl, and I have between me and my boyfriend, we have 600, 700 vinyl in our collection, and we just love going to shows and getting drinks on patios and all that fun summery stuff. And then in the winter time, I like to just sort of cozy up inside and work on the back end of things and catch up.
Was it a big kind of lifestyle change coming from the East Coast out to Portland? I mean, I've only lived really on the West Coast most of my life. Was that a big change?
It's a pretty big change. The pace here is a lot slower. Just people's attitudes, I feel like, are much more laid back here. There's a lot to do in North Carolina as far as the outdoors go. Back home, we would say, you can drive 6 hours and be at the mountains, and a couple hours and be at the beach. So here it's like everyone says, it's an hour and a half to the mountains and an hour and a half to the beach. So, everything's a lot more condensed. There's much more things to do outdoors, a lot more just variety in the landscapes and where you could go and things you can do.
Do you enjoy doing a lot of that? We have a lot of, kind of adventure elopements around here. And we just had Anne, who's going to be on the podcast, and she does a lot of makeup for kind of these adventure elopements. Is that something you enjoy, kind of going out and exploring that as well?
Yeah, for sure. I have done quite a few waterfall elopements. I haven't done many that require hiking up for 2 hours to some overlooked cliff. I think that would be amazing. I just haven't had that chance yet. I have a couple of waterfall weddings, elopements already planned for next year as well. A couple at the beach. And I think, I love doing those. I think they're really sweet. And the intimate elopements are always, just a really fun time.
Do you do a good balance of kind of larger weddings and elopements, or where do you kind of fall in terms of where you like to work?
I will shoot any kind of wedding, any size, and I love that variety about it. I've done several Indian weddings as well, which, one of them was 500 guests. So I love that energy as well as, the smaller, more intimate groups where it's just 5 of you or, even less. And I'm the one signing the marriage license. So yeah, I love it all.
On your kind of questionnaire that you filled out for the podcast, you were talking about this Northwest Wedding Underground. Do you want to talk about that and what is that?
Yeah, so Northwest Wedding Underground is a new project that I started recently with the help of my friend Angela Holm. And it's just a website that it features some of our favorite vendors and venues in the Northwest. It's got a heavy focus on video, so we do little interviews with the vendors that participate, and we do a tour of the venue space. And, we really hope that it helps couples sort of get a little more insight into some of the venues and vendors that we really like in this area.
Yeah, you talk about, and even wanting to come on the podcast, being a part of this community and kind of, bringing together people. Talk about just the motivation behind that and doing this project and, styled sheets and everything. I mean, kind of, I guess, just continuing to evolve this community that you're in. And what is the motivation behind that?
Yeah, I think the motivation behind it is that, I'm in my house for the majority of my work week, just editing. And so building the community, the other wedding vendors and pros out there are like my coworkers. And I think just, having that more in mind and getting out there and working together and creating things and building things together, is just a lot of fun and can help us all grow, all together. So that's sort of where I was coming at from when I created the project, just wanting to get to know them better. I feel like, you work with them for one day at a wedding and that's sort of it. You might see them again in a couple months or a couple years. So just sort of bringing us a little bit, getting to know each other a little bit more and spending more time together and yeah.
That's good. Now, this might be a tough question, but, in terms of photography and you've worked with, so many couples over the years, what do you wish more people, asked about photography or knew about, that you feel like you're constantly having to kind of, answer questions or you wish that people would put more importance on one thing or, what is kind of, I could think of video and a lot of different stuff that I wish that, people had video or put priorities on certain things. Do you wish that there was stuff that people, asked more about in photography or knew more about or that you wish that people knew more about?
I think the first thing I think of is just in general, I'm thinking about couples. I wish that they spent more time choosing their photographer. I don't know if that's quite the direction you were
That's perfect.
going with it, but I hear so many stories about from strangers that just meet me. They're like, oh, I wish I had chosen a better photographer or spent more time, looking for someone. It's so it can be so tempting when you have a family member or a friend or someone who's recommended or offers to do your wedding for free to just jump on that to save a little bit of money. But it's not really worth the risk if you aren't in love with their work or if they don't have anything to show or to represent what they can do if photography is important to you. So I think just doing a little more research and not trying to save that if that's important to you. Just, finding someone who's in your budget that you can really say that you love their work and that you're going to be excited to look at that for forever.
No, I totally agree with that. I mean, and especially, you get like couples a lot where they're, you're like, hey, I'm getting married next year. And so you're like, well, I'm good about kind of following up and stuff, but you don't want to like overwhelm them if you're like, well, you got 12 months here or whatever to figure it out. But then, sometimes I'll email back like a week later. They're like, oh yeah, we already found like, we're all ready to go. And you're like, wow, like that was really quick. It was really quick to kind of make, especially like photography, it's such a huge decision. And yeah, I do think there's that balance between, well, we're going to take 6 months to decide, and then we're going to take like a week. And I think that there is like a good middle ground there.
Yeah, for sure.
Plus, you just wish that they hired you too. No, or the right photographer.
Yeah, as long as I think they connect with their photographer and their work, and they could see themselves in the work. I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, also, I mean, it just, that's, I think, what all anybody wants is, just to kind of let us know, yay or nay, but also just to make sure that you do find somebody, that you're excited about. I mean, I think that I want, and I'm sure you want couples that are excited to work with you, and it's not that you were just, the one that was referred or like the cheapest option or whatever. You want someone that's excited to kind of be, that wants you to be a part of their day, right?
Yeah. Yeah, one of the questions I ask on my contact form is, how excited are you for me to be your photographer? And it's like a scale of 1 to 10. I'm always like, if someone doesn't put 10, I don't really understand why they're contacting me.
That's funny. What do you wish that more people knew about you or your photography or kind of anything else that, that I haven't asked so far? Any burning topics to discuss before we let you go?
I guess not really about me or my photography, but just other people who are, starting their business and trying to get out there. I feel like a lot of people look at me and my business and they think it's really easy for me and that it's something that just sort of happened and it's just a breeze. And I feel like I'd like them to know that it is, a lot of work and it takes a lot of courage, but you just have to get out there and do it. Just like this podcast, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Why am I on this? But I'm just like, I'm going to do it. And here I am. You just have to sort of jump over those hurdles and just go for it and see where it takes you.
Yeah, I mean, 15 years is a long time. I mean, even I am always just kind of curious. That's just a lot of time, even just, with like the recession and just, our just kind of the world in the last 15 years to kind of still be doing this, I think is obviously a testament to that you kind of know what you're doing and obviously that it wasn't easy and that it was a lot of work. I mean, what do you advice to people or the biggest lessons you've learned over the last, 15 years is a long time.
Yeah, it is. I can't believe it's been 15 years. I think it just takes a lot of dedication. So not giving up, even if you feel like it, you're not getting where you want to be, just keep pushing through and putting the time in and hopefully it'll come around. I feel like I am a pretty shy person and pretty quiet, which a lot of people I feel like also think I'm really extroverted and just naturally super confident. But, it does just take a lot of putting all of those thoughts aside and just going for it.
Well, good. And I appreciate you doing the podcast. It was good.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I know you were a little nervous. We did it. We're here. So good job. If people want to learn more about you and your photography and kind of, the underground project and kind of everything else, kind of do any plugs or anything where you would want people to check out your work or about you.
Okay. So you can find me at my website, crystaljeans.net. I'm on Instagram with my wedding work at Crystal Jeans Photography. My portrait work is at Crystal Jeans Portraits. And then for Northwest Wedding Underground, it's northwestweddingunderground.com, and that's just NW Wedding Underground. And for Instagram, it's NW Wedding Underground. Yeah.
Verified. I'm looking at the thing you filled out. That's all accurate and correct. So good job. And obviously we didn't even get into portraits and stuff, but you do kind of focus on that as well in the off season.
I do a lot of portraits in between the week and especially holidays. I just finished up 80 holiday mini sessions for Christmas cards and it's been really, really busy.
Wow, that's a lot of minis.
Yeah, it was a lot.
How was that?
It was fun. I partner with a garden center locally, and I do all of their locations and just all day shooting mini sessions with their displays.
That's a lot of mini sessions. That's crazy. Well, perfect. Well, thank you so much again for coming on. And I know it's, it's not always the easiest thing, but I do tell people, we do try to make it pretty easy. So thank you again. I appreciate that. If you're like Crystal and you're, interested in coming on the podcast, you can go to www.bestmadevideos.com/podcast guest. And that's a nice, easy questionnaire that you can fill out that kind of gets the process started of coming on.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks again. This has been another episode of Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. Check back next week for another wedding vendor interview. Thanks so much.